That is our success factor. I'm not Jewish. I have a huge, huge, huge respect for the Hebrews, the Israelites, and what they've been through. Huge, huge religion. My wife is a great fan. Anyhow, I've just used this as an illustrator. That's the Star of David, but now there are 6 points here, and our relationships. The middle is us, you, me, the vet. And our relationships are what is the success factor in our practice, I believe. Our relationships, that's me, the vet, or you, the vet, with our staff. We must have a good relationship with our staff. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying, with our clients. And again, here we must use those personality traits or compartments. If you know your client is a driver and you're an old turtle in the green, the way he likes to be addressed is approached and blunt. If you use all this soppy sort of approach, which you would like to use with the teddy bear type, he won't really enjoy it. And your points and your recommendations won't be that well received. So that previous talk from Lucy is so important. Company reps, we look at them as part of our practice. These guys come around, they do, and I must boast about this. They love coming to our practice because they are welcomed. They're given as much coffee or tea. They come up back to our little back office and we talk. We make them feel important, and they are jolly important. And we like them help keep us up to date what our neighboring practices are doing and thinking. And we listen to them. I mean, just now I'll also talk about this. We're humble enough to listen. Our colleagues, obviously within our practice, within your practice, obviously those mega practices might not get to know each other well, but our colleagues, and that's within our practice, but of course our neighboring colleagues and our colleagues, the chaps that you've been studying with for these last many years, keep in touch with them. It is so important and so nice. And right now, our class of 73, we've got a very nice group on WhatsApp and so on, and we're organizing yet another get-together. And now the consultants, terribly important, and they are the financial consultants, the feed nutrition consultants and so on. And again, instead of looking at them, the animal scientists, as opposition, forget it. Welcome them, have this wonderful relationship with them. It'll benefit you, but most of all, it'll benefit your clients. And of course, your family. You've got to, that's your support group, your family at home. And number 7, there are only 6 points on that Star of David, but what is number 7? Okay, I'm just going to brief the new generation now. I mean, our record keeping in the old days was a big board there with hundreds of little holes in with golf pegs and each cow's number on that. And they used to get pegged on this board, what stage of lactation, whether in calf or not in calf, they had a different band put on. But this is the computer age, make no mistake. And there could be a feed rep with the vet talking about such and such clients' feed requirements, or the agricultural economist talking to the farmer or talking to us preferably. So yeah, this is the exciting new world you guys are in. And I'm rather envious that I've now just left it. Let's go back to this large herds conference. Incidentally, I don't see Chris watching this. He's at home with his wife. He's been in hospital. But they could have picked a fatter and more glossy cow to put on this picture. I'm sure the overseas reps looked at this and frowned. Anyhow, so there I was asked to talk on this stress thing. But I pulled their leg and said, I'm going to talk on that high esterified thing. There I am with 2 of the others. Basil Doon in the middle is a great hero of mine. He's been leading these large herds conferences all over the world. The New Zealand lady on the left, she'd given a very good, but way above all our heads talk on economics. And Basil is a pasture and nutrition specialist from New Zealand. No, not from New Zealand, from Tasmania. And then I spoke. Now, I did speak on stress, obviously. This is one of the pictures I found. Now, that could be you as a vet coming back at night and holding your head. Sorry, I've got a man here. It could be just as well be a lady vet. That could be us, holding our head, thinking, what the hell can I do for Mr. du Plessis' calves that are dying by the score from cryptosporidiosis? Or it could be the farm manager who's just been told by his boss, John, I'm giving you notice, at the end of the month, pack your bags. You haven't cut the mustard. You haven't come up to scratch. It could be the farmer himself thinking, do I carry on farming? This farm is not actually running profitably. Let me chat tomorrow to my vet who I've worked with all these years, and my accountant or whatever. This is stress, and we live with it. And make no mistake, as you probably all know, we vets do suffer from a huge amount of stress. We, unfortunately, the top of the tree now, top of the pile of occupations for stress and depression and suicide. We've overtaken our friends, the dentists, and third on the list, certainly in the Western world, are farmers. We've got to realize this, and this is what my talk was at the Large Herds Conference. And one of the big things is time out. Those minute holidays every day, hundreds of them, just take out, just forget for a second what you're doing and go and look at that little calf, let it suckle your fingers. Look at the flowers, look at the sky, whatever, just get away from it. Take long weekends every month, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, at least a week off every 3 months, and then at least, as I say, at least 2 weeks off every year. That's what my psychiatrist insisted upon doing. He said, no wonder you vets are like that, because you just work yourselves to the bone. So that's, this is a nice picture, and it could apply to anyone. Could be the farmer himself saying he's got to give his manager the boot because he just is not up to it, or he's doing too much drinking. Right. And now, this is the thing. All of us, deal with the laborers, and obviously in South Africa, most of them are not whites. It doesn't matter. But I grew up with them on that farm. They were my playmates for my first 6 or 7 years. And I posed it to the audience in that Large Herds Conference. How many of you blokes know which of your laborers are bipolar, suffer from depression, have these emotional problems? We just think it happens to us, that the higher in the farming pyramid. No, if you take an interest as to why that, even he might just be a herdsman, is leaving the gates open or rushing the cows too fast to milking, call him aside and have a chat to him and say, is there anything bothering you? And he might divulge, and you might end up having to send him to a psychiatrist or psychologist. Man, the increased productivity that chap will give you, because his respect and esteem for you as the owner or the vet. I mean, I often do that to chaps that I see are just not up to scratch or unhappy. Fortunately, I can speak Zulu pretty well, but you don't have to. Most farm workers understand English here and Afrikaans elsewhere. Show that compassion and interest. It's something that we as dairy vets are in a wonderful situation to do. And wow, the response you get. Again, going off the subject slightly, I found out early on in my dairy vet life that these guys, all of them, very few of them follow rugby, but they all follow soccer passionately. So I decided, I've never kicked a soccer ball in my life. I decided that I'm going to support Mamelodi Sundowns. Heaven alone knows why I chose Sundowns, but I did. So now, whenever I went onto a farm, I'd make sure over the weekend I'd find out what Sundowns or Pirates or Chiefs had done, or Swallows or whatever. And so we had something in common to chat about, to pull at one another's legs, and so on and so forth. And funnily enough, at the moment, I call them aside because they've all got their signs, Chiefs are that, and Pirates are that, and Sundowns are sky's the limit. And Sundowns have just done very well recently. In fact, they won the PSL. So my bit of amusement now is I see these guys from the other side and I say, no, Cyril Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa, he must go and take pension. He must get out of politics. And Pitso Masameng must take over. Now, Pitso was the coach of Pirates and very successful. And of course, that raises just such goodwill. So when you do get called to that farm at 8 o'clock at night to do a filthy, rotten carving, and you need some labor to assist you, you'll always have a much more cooperative team coming along, and they'll smile and we'll chat about football. Time out, whether that's the farmer, the farm manager, yourself, that's the sort of time out. I love this picture. What a happy photo. And they're the kids getting in touch with nature. They shouldn't suffer from too much nature deficit disorder. Back to our Star of David and relationships. I'm going to go to the middle one, and that's your relationship with yourself. You must be at peace with yourself and be able to communicate with yourself. And if you do have these ups and downs, you must learn these little tricks that I learned when I was in a clinic last year. I tried to commit suicide, but fortunately, the good Lord said, no, that's not your time yet, Poiki. And anyhow, so thinking it out, arguing with yourself, why are you doing this? And of course, I'm a believer, and the Lord God, I think our creator or cosmos, whatever your belief is, you've got to have a wonderful relationship with that. And just thank the Lord for what our vocation as dairy vets presents us with. Right, pasture vets. The pasture is the most wonderful thing. Normally, as a dairy vet, you don't have time to go out and walk the pastures. Now that I'm retired, I quite often, well, regularly, am asked by my ex-clients to come out and do a farm walk with them, proper consulting. And part of it, we walk through their pastures. This is ryegrass pasture, by the way. And you learn. And in fact, we had a New Zealander came out to our district, a young New Zealander, who retaught our farmers, believe it or not, how to grow and graze ryegrass properly. And the cow herd sizes just almost tripled. Instead of running 2.5 to 3 cows per hectare, they're now running 4 cows per hectare. And we now rotate through these pastures every 26 days instead of every 36. So that was great. And you can learn from these chaps. And I remember loving spending hours with this young chap, this young New Zealand agronomist. And also the wonder of grass. I mean, now, dairy vets. Here is a case where the feed rep on the left, without the hat, has been called to this farm by the farmer on the right because he's furious. The feed rep had insisted the farmer use a new upgrade meadow feed to feed his dairy cows. And before long, he was phoned by the farmer on the right and said, take your bloody meal, excuse my languages, take your bloody meal away from my farm. Ever since I've fed that, our production has just dropped and dropped and dropped. From an average of 28 liters per cow, we're now sitting on 12, for argument's sake. And it's just gone down and down and down over a week. I've already ordered meal from EPOL, your opposition. Just get your meal off the farm and get the hell out of here. Fortunately, the rep called me and said, Todd, it can't be our meal. It's his state of the art, the latest dairy meal, such and such a percent of this and that and so on. So I went out to the farm and did a walk around with these two chaps bristling at each other behind me. The first thing I noticed was this. Now that, on those gorgeous ryegrass pastures, should have been like that. The dung, that worried me a little bit. So I, because I'd already looked in the shed and smelt the meal, it didn't smell, hadn't gone off. It didn't have fungus or mold or anything like that. The cows, I must say, looked very starey, and not very many at all were lying down chewing their cuds. They didn't look too happy. And I just wondered, anyhow. So now I went up to where they're drinking water. I thought maybe the water's terribly salty or brack or something. But the farmer assured me that it came out of a very nice spring up on the hillside. Now, incidentally, how's that for a working office? dairy vets. This is our office and our operating theatre. Comparing, this is a very bad photo, by the way, for our Port Town colleagues, and that's their view. Ah, man, you can't compare it, can you? Anyhow, so now I'm just going to go on to, we have to use our senses. First of all, sight. Have to use our eyes, obviously, looking at the passes, looking at the dung, although you could feel it with your toes. And yeah, sight. This is an old microscope that when I went into practice, we used, and we used to have a torch at the bottom shining on a mirror. And I recall I could go and for an hour talking to you about the first time we found Bovis, Babesia bovis in our district. That came in, and now it's swept right through KZN and into Griqualand. And I was, again, blowing some smoke up my Zoom pipe. I was the first vet to discover it. He'd really lost 74 cows, thinking it was tulip poisoning, because he had pushed these cows, incidentally, they were Bonsmaras, not dairy cows, onto a paddock, to a field camp full of tulip. And he was convinced it was the tulip that was killing them. And he bought every bag of activated charcoal in the surrounding 100 kilometers, just about, dosing them. And eventually he decided better call the vets. And we just had the radio network installed in the district for security, as well as us vets. And I radioed him and I said, please, when I get to your farm, please could you have the most recently dead cow's brain open with an axe. And I had cut, so I got there and we put the brain on his wife's kitchen sink. She wasn't too happy about that, but that was besides the point. And I did, like as I was looking for hot water, scraped out on some glass slides and fixed it with the alcohol and Ginza, and with my torch shining at the bottom there. There, jumping out at me in the capillaries in the brain were these millions, billions of red blood cells, all jam-packed with these tiny Babesia bovis parasites. And so we just filled the rest of the herd up with Beronal, and the death stopped there and then. So that was sight, using sight. Okay, next one, hearing. We had to use our hearing. This vet, I got this off the internet, as I did with most of these pictures. He's obviously listening for a right displaced abomasum, I reckon. In America, and I think a lot of us vets in South Africa, if it's a right displaced abomasum, just call the butcher's van or whatever. We've got a nice system with some Indian folk who collect carcasses here. But I've, being old-fashioned and doing them, lying these cows on their backs and doing them midline instead of more or less there be in the paralumbar fossa, I've managed to operate and replace these right diagnosed abomasums. I've probably got about a 70% success rate. But again, that's up to you. You must do what you do well and stick to what works for you. Gavin and Rob always do, even the left displaced, they fix in that left, the right paralumbar fossa, by the way. And there's also a newish thing. I wonder, I'm shameful to think of how many displaced abomasums Peter Collier and I missed in those old days. You didn't know it. But if these farmers, if they all dried their cows onto that Rooikras, like I was talking about earlier, I am convinced the displaced abomasum rate would drop phenomenally. They need that rumen to be full of good old-fashioned roughage. That's what the Lord made ryegrass or Rooikras for. And I kid you not, instead of drying them off onto more lush pastures, put them onto good old felt and felt bales. Anyhow, I could rant about this all night. No, I'm going to go back. I remember hearing. I remember early on, a farmer, I'd just done a calving on this cow, pulled out a nice live calf, and they left her overnight in the little crawl because I did it as the sun was going down. And they were about to put in a new floor into the little crush pen. And they had a pile of rubble, stones about the size of a golf ball or guinea fowl's egg, in the corner that was ready. The next day they were going to lay down the cement, and then the rubble would be fixed into the cement to make a nice rough floor for the crush. And so the farmer, as I left and the calf was fine and I was just leaving, well, he told me this later, he asked the herdsman to just go and get some hay, because the cow was going to stay there overnight, and get a bucket of molasses and put it on the hay. So the herdsman did that, but somehow he balanced the bucket of molasses on that pile of river rubble, and the bucket fell over. And so all these stones were like sweets to this cow. So as I say, I went out to investigate. Yeah, I didn't say so. That cow, I was called out to see 4 or 5 days later. And he said, this blooming cow you carved, you must have made a mess up inside or torn her uterus or something, because she's just gone downhill from the time you delivered that calf. Well, I examined her and I thought she was fine. I couldn't make out anything. Anyhow, I got her to walk around. She was in the crush pen. Got her to walk around, and I heard this clot, 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 clot sound. So I put my stethoscope to her rumen on the other side and made her walk, and there's clot, 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 clot. So I did a rumenotomy, and I pulled out, and I still remember it because it was the same year that I ran the Comrades Marathon for the first time, 1968. I pulled out 68 stones the size of, as I say, golf balls and guinea fowl eggs that were, obviously she'd eaten these lovely things for that overnight while she was in that crawl. And yeah, so she'd eaten all these stones, and maybe one or two had gone a bit deeper down. So the farmer was watching while I did this rumenotomy. He was sitting on top of the pole fence, and not a humorous farmer. He didn't have any sense of humor at all, I remember him. But he did have one sense of humor, because when I finished the op, he very quietly said, well, I guess she was stoned. Right, touch is the next sense that we have to use, obviously. And this is a delightful picture. I like some of the students that I've had the pleasure of tutoring here at the practice. That girl, she's just for the first time diagnosed or felt a pregnancy. But I looked at the slide when I was going through this picture last night, and I actually realized this is a mare, not a dairy cow, but that doesn't matter. Look at that absolute sheer delight. And it's a delight I've always got when students come around, to see them learning and picking up. It's a great delight. And I urge you guys, when you're in practice, to welcome the next generation, or those that you can mentor. It's great. Smell is the other one. Again, I got this off the internet from Shutterstock. We have to use our sense of smell from time to time. Opening up a rumen, I think, if there's urea poisoning, you can smell it, and especially prussic acid, you get that almondy smell, which fortunately we don't have to have too often. But and then there's the sense. Let's see, what have I got next? I'm going to have an interval just now. But yeah, the sense of smell, of course, we're exposed to a lot. A, with postmortems, and B, with rotten dystocia, those rotten carvings, which, much as our cattlemen and dairymen have progressed over the years, and they tend to most simple dystocia these days, we still get the after the weekend dystocia, where the cow went into labor on a Friday or a Saturday, and by the time Monday comes, the calf's rotten, and the herdsman had probably a bit too much J and B, and those stinking rotten carvings that some of you end up doing a Caesar on. Incidentally, all my Caesars now, I don't do, it's a Paralumber on the side, even if it's a fresh one. Well, if it's a fresh one, I like to do them standing. It's wonderful. Get out a live calf. If obviously you can't get it out the regular way. Otherwise, I do them paramedian. And it's so easy. There, where's my pointer? There, along that sort of line there. And the uterus, a big uterus, virtually presents itself right to you there. Doesn't get soiled. All the rotten juices just pour out onto the pasture. If you're doing a Caesar on an emphysematous fetus, it is very, very rewarding. Anyhow, what I'm getting back is to the smell. And there's been debate. I remember putting it on one of our vet sites. What do you guys use to take away this terrible smell? Your wife's best deodorant or your whatever it is? But I agree. And my dear friend, Mike Lowry, who also writes books on short stories on veterinary matters, we concur that the most effective smell remover is Lifebuoy soap. It's an old-fashioned one, but you can still get it. Lifebuoy soap is definitely the best. Guys, I'm sorry now. I'd just like to take a few minutes break. I've got a bladder that I need to empty, and I'd like to just get a little bit of coffee. So can maybe just take a little short coffee break, 5 minutes max. Can you hear me, Helene or Cordia?
We can hear you, Dr. Todd, and you can continue. Thank you.
No, I just want to say, just out of interest, I've got a bit of a prostate problem. They reckon, the medics reckon 50% of men over 50 years old will have some form of prostatitis, prostate cancer, 60% of men over 60, 70% of men over 70, and 80% over 80. So, but these days it's not a big deal. But it does mean like me, I'm being treated at the moment, and that's, by the way, I don't know if you can see my mug. It says, caution, I am a retired veterinarian. I have stories and all day to tell them, to talk. Stay at your own risk. Laat ons aangaan. Right. Let's go back to that. I think I was going on to the next sense. We had smell. Now, taste. Taste is a sense that very few veterinarians realize we can use. So I went up to the water trough that, as I say, I thought was probably going to be very brackish or something like this. And I dipped my hands into it. And I was electrocuted. The farm, but I actually didn't. I just jumped back and I asked the farmer to taste this water. And he came forward and put his hands in, and of course got this incredible shock. They had recently put in a new cable to go to the center pivot, the irrigation pivot. And obviously somehow this electric cable had connected with the metal pipe that was supplying the water to that trough. So that's where the sense of taste comes in. Another incident where taste came into play, when I first came into practice, there was a joker in town. He was the known village joker. He was always playing practical jokes on everyone. We'll call him Robert. And called me one day to pregnancy test a couple of dozen of his heifers. And I was happy to do that, obviously. But I noticed his face. He sort of turned around every so often and his shoulders were shrugging slightly. So I smelt a rat. And sure enough, halfway down this row of heifers in the crush was an ox. He'd put an ox there to test me or to tease me. So I didn't rise to his bait properly. Put my hand into this ox and frowned, and then pronounced very seriously, right, this one is 10 months pregnant. Well, he burst out laughing. He said, oh, I've caught you, it's an ox. How can an ox be pregnant? And he was chortling so much he didn't hear me saying, but did you hear me say it was 10 months? Because anyhow, I was now the guy in town, in the village, for the next couple of months. People would see me and dig me in the ribs and say, oh, Rob caught you, Rob caught you. So one day I thought, no, I've got to get my back on this blighter. So our practice in that time was on Peter Collier's farm, a little farm he had just outside Underberg, which is now a very nice restaurant, by the way. And I saw Mr. Rob's truck, green Land Rover, parked outside our surgery early in the morning. So I ducked into the Peter and Ina's house, into the kitchen, and I got a paper towel and a big dollop of Black Cat peanut butter. And I slapped the Black Cat peanut butter onto this paper, and I went around the hedge on the far side of the surgery, came in through the back door, where we had a couple of cages where we, in those days, kept the odd dog or cat overnight. And I came through the back door into the consulting room, and there was my partner, Peter, and on the table was Rob's dog, and she'd come in for inoculations or something. And there was Rob, and I said, good morning, Peter, good morning, Rob. And I had this paper towel in my hand with the brown blob on it. And Peter, bless his cotton socks, I mean, he really was a wonderful partner. We had no dog at all. I said, Peter, the tailor's dog is definitely not constipated. I said, look at this is brilliant. And I brought it up to my nose and I smelt. And I said, it hasn't been eating anything rotten, nothing like rotten afterbirths like so many farm dogs do. And I smelt, and Mr. Rob just sort of took a pace back, and he pulled an expression on his face. He said, sis, man. Anyhow, and I looked closer, and then I'd used my sense of smell. So I used my sense of feel, and I picked a bit of it up between my fingers and rubbed my fingers together. And I said, no, there are no bone particles here. No, he's digesting the bones. His gastric juices must be fine. I wonder. So then I took a big dollop out of my hand, and I was about to say, bile is working through, but he disappeared around the corner. And Peter said, you know, Rob's got actually a very queasy stomach. Most people know it. And we ran around, and there he was leaning against the surgery wall alongside the entrance door, vomiting up, I think, the last month's worth of food he'd eaten. And eventually he came up for air and said, all right, young fella, I think we're square now. So you guys can do that one day. Good old Black Cat peanut butter.